The reality of bugging out. Bugging out isn't the action-packed escape you see in movies or survival documentaries. It's brutally hard, both physically and mentally. While it's tempting to believe you can grab your pre-packed bag and hit the road at a moment's notice, the reality is far more complicated. Without meticulous planning and preparation, your bug-out plan can quickly turn into a disaster. Everything you'll need to survive, food, water, shelter, and security, rests squarely on your shoulders, and there's no room for mistakes. The physical toll of bugging out is one of the first harsh truths people encounter. Moving quickly while carrying a heavy pack isn't something you can wing if you're out of shape. You'll need to hike through rough terrain, possibly for days or weeks, and you might even find yourself running, climbing, or crawling to avoid hazards. Don't think you're immune from exhaustion because adrenaline's pumping through your veins. It will run out fast, and when it does, you'll be left grappling with intense fatigue and soreness. Then there's the mental strain. Bugging out isn't a vacation, it's constant decision-making under pressure. You'll have to weigh your options every minute of the day, whether it's which route to take, when to rest, or how best to ration dwindling supplies. Doubt and fear will creep in no matter how confident you are. Did you make the right call? Are you heading straight into danger? It's a psychological grind that tests even the toughest minds. The logistics are no cakewalk either. Finding clean water, safe shelter, or avoiding unwanted attention from dangerous people. Every choice matters and errors are costly. Forget about convenience. Bugging out forces you to adapt to unpredictable and unforgiving circumstances. The emotional burden compounds this. You'll constantly worry about your loved ones, question your decisions, and grapple with the isolation of being on your own. 2. The brutal truth about planning and preparation. When it comes to bugging out, most people severely underestimate the importance of proper planning and preparation. Here's the harsh reality. If you don't have multiple plans in place, you're setting yourself up for failure. Roads can get blocked, bridges can be out, or an unexpected threat could force you to change your route. Having just one plan isn't enough. You need several well-thought-out routes to your destination, along with fallback options in case your primary path becomes a dead end. If you have no idea where you're going or how to adapt to changing conditions, you're toast. Another hard truth. It's not just about hopping in a car and driving to safety. Vehicles are great until they're not. Fuel shortages, mechanical breakdowns, or traffic jams created by panicked evacuees can leave you stranded. You have to think beyond cars. Bicycles or even going on foot might be your only viable options if things really fall apart. But make no mistake, traveling long distances under stress without the luxury of a motor vehicle is grueling, and if you're not physically ready for it, you'll pay the price. Then there's navigation. Forget depending on your GPS or cell phone. If the power grid goes down or networks are overloaded, you're out of luck. You need to know how to read physical maps and use a compass like it's second nature. Navigating through unfamiliar terrain without electronic aid is an essential skill that far too many people overlook. If you think you can wing it, think again. Getting lost in a true emergency can mean the difference between survival and disaster. The bottom line, bugging out isn't just about grabbing a bag and heading out the door. If you don't plan for multiple scenarios, prepare for alternative means of transportation, and master navigation without tech, you're playing a dangerous game with your life. This is survival, not a weekend camping trip. 3. Packing smart. When it comes to bugging out, packing smart isn't just important, it's critical. Your bug-out bag will make or break your survival chances, and here's the hard truth. Most people get it wrong. They either overload their bag with useless junk or skimp on essentials, leaving themselves completely unprepared for the reality of the situation. First, your bag should be lightweight, but still capable of keeping you alive for at least 72 hours. This is not about comfort, it's about survival. Every single item in your bag should earn its place. Essentials like water, food, shelter, first aid supplies, fire-starting tools, and self-defense equipment are not optional, they are mandatory. If it can't help you stay alive or protect yourself, don't pack it. Forget about luxuries, sentimental items, or anything you think you might need. Survival doesn't care about your guesswork. Water is non-negotiable, but you can't carry gallons of it. Plan smart. Include a water filter or purification tablets. When it comes to food, lightweight and calorie-dense options like protein bars or freeze-dried meals are your best bet. Shelter doesn't mean packing a tent the size of a car. Think compact and functional, like an emergency bivvy or tarp. First aid supplies? You'll need more than Band-Aids. Factor in the possibility of serious wounds or infections. And fire-starting tools? Always have backups. Lighters, waterproof matches, and a ferro rod should all be in your kit. The other trap people fall into is overpacking. Your bag needs to be light enough for you to carry for hours, maybe days without collapsing. Think you can haul 60 pounds across rugged terrain? Be realistic. A heavy bag will slow you down and make you a target. 4. Physical challenges. The harsh reality about bugging out is that it's going to push your physical limits in ways you probably aren't prepared for. Forget the romanticized survival hero in movies. Bugging out means hauling heavy gear through uneven terrain, enduring scorching heat or freezing cold, and tackling the unexpected at every turn. It's not just a walk in the park, it's grueling. Every single task you take for granted in your daily life becomes a trial. Pitching a tent after hours of hiking with a loaded pack on your back, that's exhausting. Foraging for food or hunting while running on empty, soul-crushing. And don't even think about water. Carrying it is heavy, and finding or purifying enough to sustain you is a relentless job. Oh, and building a shelter when the rain's pouring, daylight's fading, and you're already shaking from fatigue, it's brutal. If you think you're tough enough, ask yourself this: can you keep moving when every muscle aches? Can you maintain focus when the heat is unbearable or your hands are frozen stiff? The truth is, even regular gym goers aren't necessarily ready for the endurance and functional fitness this demands. Bugging out isn't just about how much you can lift. It's about how long you can survive the relentless grind. You have to train now, not when SHTF. Build your stamina, strength, and resilience before disaster strikes. Practice carrying your bug-out bag for miles. Engage in hiking, running, or other forms of cardio to enhance endurance. Learn skills like chopping wood, hauling water, or climbing over obstacles. Develop mental toughness to keep going when exhaustion screams at you to stop. Ignoring this preparation means setting yourself up for failure. Bugging out isn't some weekend camping trip. It's survival in its rawest form, and it's way harder than you think. If you're not ready to face the brutal physical challenges, you won't stand a chance. Reality doesn't care about your excuses. 5. Temporary camps. Setting up temporary camps while bugging out is not as easy as pitching a tent and calling it a night. It's a grueling process with no room for laziness or mistakes. First of all, you'll need to choose a location that is both discreet and defensible. Forget about sprawling open fields or well-worn trails. Those are magnets for trouble. Instead, you have to scout for areas that are hidden from plain sight, but close to essentials like water. Keep in mind, the farther you are from resources, the harder survival gets. And no, you can't afford to rely on someone else finding these spots for you. This is your responsibility. You'll need to practice setting up your shelter until you can do it blindfolded. Why? Because when you're cold, wet, exhausted, or trying to work in complete darkness, there won't be time for trial and error. Expect harsh weather and unforgiving terrain as constants, not exceptions. If you can't set up shelter fast, you're leaving yourself open to exposure and predators, both animal and human. Speed and efficiency are not optional, they're survival necessities. Even worse, you can't always count on having modern gear. What happens if your tent tears, gets stolen, or simply isn't viable for the environment you're in? This is where learning to build shelters out of natural materials becomes absolutely crucial. If you don't know how to construct a basic lean-to, debris hut, or another type of emergency shelter from nature, start learning yesterday. Your survival could literally depend on it. Here's the brutal truth. Temporary camps aren't about comfort. They're about survival. They're about staying alive in conditions that are actively trying to kill you. You won't get a good night's sleep, and no one's inviting you into a cozy cabin. If you're not willing to master temporary camping in every possible scenario, you're setting yourself up for failure. Don't underestimate this skill. It's one of the most vital pieces of bugging out, and mistakes here can cost you everything. 6. Foraging for food. When you're bugging out, foraging for food isn't some cozy, Instagrammable adventure. It's an intense, high-stakes game of survival. Sure, the wild is full of edible plants, but identifying them takes skill and practice. One wrong choice and you could end up poisoning yourself. You need to build knowledge ahead of time. What plants are edible, when they're available, how to prepare them, and how to avoid the ones that will kill you. This isn't a skill you can learn overnight from skimming a couple of YouTube videos. Foraging is backbreaking, slow, and often doesn't yield nearly as much as you'd hope. If your survival plan revolves around picking berries and digging up roots, you're in for a rude awakening. Many plants are only available for a short season, and even during that window, conditions like weather or over-harvesting by wildlife may limit what you'll find. Plus, Once you're out in the field, you'll probably be expending more calories looking for food than you'll actually gain from harvesting it. This is not a sustainable long-term solution unless you really know your stuff. Supplementing your diet with small game might sound like a decent plan, but here's the truth. They don't just jump into your hands. Hunting or trapping requires practice, patience, and resources like bait, wire, or pre-made traps. If you're relying on these skills to feed yourself, you'd better be proficient before disaster strikes. The wild doesn't care about your timetable or hunger. It'll test your skills, patience, and ability to keep calm. Bottom line, foraging is hard work, and if you're unprepared, it won't be the magical solution you're envisioning. You need to know your terrain, prepare tools, and above all, practice long before your survival depends on it. This isn't romanticized survival. Out there, mistakes cost you precious energy or your life. 7. Water sourcing and purification. If you think bugging out is all about gear and glorious survival tactics, think again. Water is the absolute lifeline of your survival, and it's a royal pain if you don't plan properly. Without clean water, you're toast in 3 days, maybe less if you're sweating bullets out there. But here's the brutal truth. Most people completely underestimate how hard it is to secure drinkable water on the move. You can't just stumble across a crystal-clear mountain stream and start drinking like it's an Instagram camping trip. That water could be laced with parasites, bacteria, or chemicals, and downing it untreated could land you with vomiting, diarrhea, or worse. Not exactly a survival success story. You have to carry a method to purify water. No excuses. Portable filters are decent and pretty user-friendly, but they won't remove everything, especially viruses. Purification tablets are better in that regard, but give the water a nasty chemical taste that you'll just have to deal with. Boiling is the oldest trick in the book, but it can be time-consuming and fuel-heavy, so you'd better hope you can make a fire. Procrastinating on water prep isn't an option. When you're out of clean water, you're already behind. And don't give me the "I'll just carry lots of water" argument either. Water is heavy. A single gallon weighs over 8 pounds, and that's enough for 1 day, maybe 2 if you're conservative and not trekking through brutal heat. You need lightweight, rugged containers and a backup plan for finding refill points in any environment. Scout your route and know where rivers, springs, or other reliable sources are. This isn't something you can just improvise. Here's the bottom line. If you don't prioritize water sourcing and purification, your bug-out plan is doomed before it even starts. Get it wrong and dehydration, heat stroke, or waterborne illness will take you out faster than you'd imagine. 8. Mental and emotional resilience. If you think surviving the physical ordeal of bugging out is hard, you're not even halfway there. The real monster is the mental and emotional toll. Decision fatigue will slap you in the face harder than the physical exhaustion. Every choice, where to go, what to eat, which route is safer, drains your mental reserves until making even one more decision feels impossible. Stress will sit on your shoulders like a sack of bricks, slowing you down and making every step harder. The emotional challenges? They're no joke. Homesickness, fear, uncertainty, they'll creep into your head, clawing at your morale until giving up feels like an option. But giving up isn't an option if you want to survive. Here's the brutal truth. You can't just tough it out. Building resilience is non-negotiable. You need systems. You need routines. A routine is your best friend when you're operating under chaos. Every decision eliminated is a tiny battle won. Pre-plan as much as humanly possible to conserve mental energy when things go sideways. Routine meals, routes, and priorities will allow you to work on autopilot when things feel overwhelming. Don't underestimate the importance of maintaining your morale. It sounds soft, sure, but failing to keep your emotional well-being in check can crush your survival chances. Recognize that there will be emotional lows. They're inevitable. When they hit, address them. Ignore them, and they'll just dig deeper. Small victories, celebrating things like finding clean water, reaching a checkpoint, or even waking up alive, are what keep you going. Actively reflect on these wins before collapsing into negativity. Comfort matters too, no matter how trivial it seems when you're hauling gear and trying to stay alive. A photo of loved ones, a small keepsake, or even a dang piece of chocolate can brighten up the darkest moments. These tiny comforts remind you why you're fighting so hard. They're not luxury items, they're survival tools for your mind. If you think you can treat your mental health as an afterthought, think again. Mental and emotional resilience is not a nice-to-have. It's your edge between survival and failure. Ignore it and you'll break long before your body gives out. 9. Logistics. Logistics will crush you if you're not prepared. Bugging out isn't just about throwing a backpack together and charging into the wilderness. Every single logistical detail matters, because one screw-up can kill you, or worse, leave you stranded, staring at your mistake, wishing you'd planned better. Transport, navigation, timing, and routes, it all has to be perfect, or you're finished. First up, transportation. Thinking you'll just hop in your car and drive to safety? Think again. What happens when the roads are jammed, or your car runs out of gas? You'd better have backups. Bikes, boats, your own 2 feet, have multiple modes of transport ready, and assume your first choice will fail. And guess what? Walking is most likely going to be your reality, so you'd better be physically ready for it. If a 5-mile hike with your gear leaves you winded now, just imagine trying it in a life or death situation with no food or water. Get in shape now, or get left behind. Then, there's navigation. Your phone's GPS won't be there to hold your hand, so don't count on it. Learn how to read an actual map. Master the use of a compass, and familiarize yourself with natural navigation techniques like reading the stars, following riverbanks, or noting the sun's position. Trust me, guessing which way to go in the middle of nowhere will only get you lost faster. Your timing and route planning need to be airtight. Heading out too early or too late could be a fatal mistake. Plan several evacuation routes ahead of time, and don't rely on just one. Roads may be blocked, areas could be patrolled, or nature itself might throw you a curveball. Your chosen pace is equally critical. Push too hard and you'll burn out after day one. Move too slow and you'll fall behind or miss critical windows of opportunity. Balancing speed and sustainability is the key, and it requires both strategy and self-awareness. Here's the raw truth about logistics when bugging out. They're unforgiving. One oversight, one missed contingency, and you're done. Forget the Hollywood version of survival with heroic stunts and adrenaline-fueled improvisation. The reality is this: planning, preparation, and execution are the only ways you'll make it through. Anything less, and you're gambling with your life. 10. Security and safety. The cold hard truth about bugging out is that your survival depends on your ability to stay alive. Period. Security and safety are not just optional considerations, they are fundamental pillars for every second you're out there. The idea of dealing with wildlife may seem romantic, but out in the wild it's life or death. You'll need to learn to read animal tracks like your life depends on it, because it does. Misfortune often starts with ignorance. Fail to distinguish between the tracks of a harmless deer and a potentially deadly predator, and you may be walking straight into danger. And it's not just the big predators you need to worry about. Disease-carrying insects, such as ticks and mosquitoes, can ruin you faster than you might think. Malaria, Lyme disease, and even an infected bite in a survival situation could spell the beginning of the end. Protect yourself with repellent, physical barriers, and a thorough understanding of how to avoid these pests. And while nature is dangerous, humans are your biggest threat. Civilization being stripped away brings out the barbaric nature of people desperate to survive. You must maintain relentless vigilance against other humans who could harm or steal from you. Practice situational awareness at all times, whether you're around settlements, at water sources, or simply camping in the wild. Leave no trail. Avoid announcing your presence, and always assume that someone might be watching. Invest the time now to learn effective self-defense. This doesn't just mean acquiring firearms and ammunition, though those are key tools in your arsenal. It also means understanding non-lethal defense methods like pepper spray or tactical batons, for when lethal force isn't the best option. However, humans and animals aren't your only adversaries. The environment itself poses countless hazards that can kill as quickly as any predator. Camping in dry creek beds might seem like a good idea until a flash flood comes barreling through with zero warning. Shooting for the best view might lead you to camp below a cliff where falling rocks could crush you in your sleep. Your only hope of making it through safely is to think ahead. Always scout every location with a sharp eye, evaluate every risk, and have multiple escape routes. Out in the wild, there's no such thing as being too paranoid. 11-Finding a long-term home. If you thought bugging out was just about picking a secluded spot and settling in, think again. Finding a long-term home post-correction is one of the hardest decisions you'll face because everything is at stake. First, remoteness is key. The farther you are from desperate, chaotic populations, the safer you'll be. It's not paranoia, it's simple math. A location that's too close for comfort might have resources now, but those resources will also attract the kind of people you want to avoid at all costs. On the flip side, don't build your hermitage in an impossible wilderness. unless you're an expert survivalist with experience in total self-sufficiency. Balance isolation and sustainability. A deserted spot is ideal, but make sure it's a place where you can actually live. Water is non-negotiable. A reliable water source is everything, not just for drinking, but for sanitation, cooking, and, if you're smart, future agriculture. Don't fool yourself into thinking you can get by with stored water forever. Streams, springs, or even a rain catchment system can make the difference between thriving and wasting away. Scout your long-term options for water access and be prepared to defend those resources like your life depends on them. Because it does. Agriculture potential goes hand in hand with water access. Food you bring with you will eventually run out. Starvation is a slow and ugly death, and scavenging or hunting can't sustain you indefinitely. The soil where you set up shop should be fertile enough to grow food for the long haul. Take the time to understand growing seasons and local climate. You're not a farmer? Don't care. You'll learn or you'll die. Test the ground for acidity, drainage, and the ability to support crops like potatoes, corn, or beans that can sustain life. Shelter is another brutal reality most people underestimate. A tarp and some paracord might cut it for a week, but when months stretch into years, you'll need structures strong enough to withstand wind, rain, snow, and heat. Use the local environment to your advantage. Fallen trees, mud, stone. Whatever is available should become your building material. Fancy prepackaged survival kits can become useless after a while. Durability always trumps convenience. Something temporary won't cut it. Energy needs aren't a luxury. They're essential if you want to stay ahead of the curve. Renewable energy options like solar panels or small wind turbines should be your go-to if you want any semblance of power for tools, lights, or communication devices. Otherwise, you're stuck burning wood and hoping you never run out of sources. Remember, every resource you rely on has an expiration date, so prepare alternatives. Finally, recognize this disturbing truth. No one survives truly alone forever. Building a small, tight-knit community is vital for shared labor, defense, and diverse skills. But not just any community will do. You only want the trustworthy, reliable, competent people you'd bet your life on, because that's exactly what you'll be doing. Set boundaries, test loyalty, and don't hesitate to part ways with anyone who compromises the group's safety or cohesion. Build trust, not blindly, but deliberately. Above all, have a contingency plan. Your carefully chosen perfect site could become inhabitable in a heartbeat. Fire, floods, disease, or hostile aggression might force you to abandon it without warning. Have a backup location identified and ready to go. Don't leave this to chance. It's life or death. The brutal truth is this: bugging out isn't romantic or exciting. It's harsh, relentless, and incredibly dangerous. Every mistake, no matter how small, could mean the end. Know this now and plan accordingly. Otherwise, you won't make it. Survival isn't easy, and bugging out isn't the escape fantasy it's made out to be. It's war against the odds. Prepare for nothing less. 12 skills. When you think about bugging out, it's easy to imagine yourself as some kind of action hero, effortlessly surviving and overcoming every obstacle in your path. Reality check. If you don't know the basic practical skills needed to stay alive, you're doomed before you even start. Bugging out isn't just about throwing your gear in a bag and hitting the road. It's about knowing how to use that gear and adapting to whatever the environment throws at you. Skills like shelter building, water purification, foraging, and navigation are not optional. They're the difference between surviving and becoming another nameless victim. Shelter comes first. You might think a tent or tarp in your bug-out bag is good enough, but what happens when your gear gets lost or destroyed? You need to know how to improvise. Can you build a debris shelter? How about setting up a tarp in brutal wind or rain? If not, you're going to learn the hard way when the weather turns savage and you're left shivering all night. Exposure can kill faster than you think, sometimes in hours. Learn shelter building now while it's not a life or death situation. Water is another critical issue. Forget about guzzling water from any random stream or puddle like they do in movies. Contaminated water will wreck your body with diarrhea or worse, leaving you dehydrated and helpless. You have to know how to find, filter, and purify water to make it safe. This isn't about buying a fancy filter and calling it a day. What if that filter fails or your purification tablets run out? Do you know how to boil water properly or improvise a solar still? If not, you're toast. Drink filthy water and you'll regret it, probably with your life. Foraging sounds like a romantic way to get food in the wild, but the brutal truth is that it's hard work, with steep consequences if you screw it up. Unless you're deeply familiar with local plants, you're gambling your life every time you eat something you pick. One misidentified berry or mushroom could send you straight to the ER, or worse, the morgue. And don't even think about spearfishing or trapping game unless you've practiced those skills beforehand. Winging it in a real bug-out scenario won't work. The wilderness doesn't care about your YouTube education or confidence. Then there's navigation. Getting turned around in unfamiliar terrain isn't just embarrassing, it's deadly. GPS devices are helpful, but batteries die and signals fail. That's when traditional navigation skills step in. Map and compass use is non-negotiable. Do you know how to orient a map to the landscape or find your direction on an overcast day? If your answer is no, consider this your wake-up call. Without these skills, you might find yourself wandering aimlessly, burning through time, energy, and resources while predators, human or otherwise, close in on you. Training with your gear is just as critical as the skills themselves. Owning top-of-the-line tools and supplies won't matter if you don't know how to use them under pressure. That multi-tool you're so proud of? Practice using it. That fire starter? Drill with it in wet and windy conditions. Every piece of gear in your pack should feel like an extension of yourself, because you might not have the luxury of time to figure it out when disaster strikes. You don't want to be fumbling with a knife or paracord when the stakes couldn't be higher. 13. Mental and emotional preparedness. Bugging out is more than just a physical test. It's an all-out assault on your mental and emotional endurance. Most people don't fully grasp the emotional toll of leaving everything behind until it's too late. Step 1 in preparing mentally is realizing that bugging out is going to suck hard. You're giving up comfort, stability, and the sense of safety home provides. Most of what you know will feel like it's crumbling. And if you're not ready to deal with that, stress and fear will paralyze you. Uncertainty will be your new normal. You won't know where your next meal is coming from, how far you'll need to go, or when you'll feel safe again. If you even will. This constant sense of the unknown can break a person faster than hunger or thirst. Stress management techniques like deep breathing and meditation might sound cheesy, but they're practical tools to keep you balanced when everything around you feels like chaos. Learn to center yourself now, because panic is a death sentence in a survival scenario. Positive affirmations aren't just fluff. They provide hope when you're staring down the abyss. The emotional weight doesn't stop with you. If you're bugging out with a group, teamwork and communication become life or death necessities. Disorganized or dysfunctional groups fall apart fast, and trust me, you don't want to be the person inspiring resentment or division during a crisis. People will be scared, irritable, and on edge, which is why maintaining morale is critical. Open communication, encouraging each other, and delegating tasks appropriately can mean the difference between a strong team and a disastrous breakdown. You also need to prepare for the grim reality that not everyone will make it. There's a high chance you'll face loss, whether it's a loved one, a group member, or your sense of self. Coming to terms with this possibility beforehand can help ease the emotional shock when, not if, tragedy strikes. This world you're stepping into is brutal, and pretending it's not won't help anyone. Be mentally prepared to make tough decisions, even if they haunt you every step of the way. Ultimately, mental and emotional toughness is what keeps you moving forward when your body is screaming to stop. Survival isn't just about physical capabilities or gear, it's about your mindset. If you convince yourself that giving up isn't an option, you've already won half the battle. Bugging out is not for the faint of heart, and if you go in unprepared for the psychological roller coaster it entails, survival might just chew you up and spit you out. Prepare yourself now, because this isn't a game or a thrill-seeking adventure. It's hard, ugly, and for keeps.